Welcome in, everybody. Let's dive right into it. One of my favorite things to do in my free time is to dive down rabbit holes, like as far and as dark and deep as I can go. And my favorite kinds of rabbit holes are often historically based or conspiratorial in nature. Well, one that I came across recently that has apparently been around for a long time, and I somehow never heard about it until recently, is the Black Knight satellite conspiracy. Now, this conspiracy posits that there's an artificial satellite of alien origin that is in polar orbit around the Earth. So that means it orbits horizontally instead of vertically. It orbits the poles, which is not something that is natural. When a foreign object is caught in a large celestial body's gravitational orbit, it will be centered around that celestial body's equatorial line, the equator. That's where most things really center around with large celestial masses. Is their what's going to be closest to their gravitational center, and that's the equator. But this object, this Black Knight satellite, is said to orbit almost in the opposite direction. Well, I guess it would be in the opposite direction. It goes around the poles, which is not supposed to be how things orbit celestial bodies. So already we're starting off great here. Now, it's supposed that this quote-unquote satellite has been orbiting the Earth for about 13,000 years, some people say, being sent here by unknown alien individuals to observe life on Earth. Now, this conspiracy has a long history with a good number of notable scientific individuals making note of what would later be referred to as the Black Knight satellite. And it is kind of weird to me to call this a conspiracy theory, because the object in question, by all accounts, it does not act like a typical piece of space debris. Like I said earlier, it's not behaving like a broken off piece of a comet or an asteroid rock, a condensed and crushed piece of quartz or obsidian matter. And in several instances, people have gotten some very odd reverberations and return signals. A really crude way to think about it is how a bat might travel around using echolocation, where they bounce sounds off of objects and they can tell where an object is, sometimes what it is, if it's an animal, a tree, or what have you. It's a lot how radar and sonar work, actually. So some people have been getting signals that are like that. Suffice to say, there have been a lot of people and stories and sightings that are lending credence to this theory. Now, there have been organizations like NASA and certain government-owned scientists that would claim that the Black Knight satellite conspiracy theory is really just a jumble of a whole bunch of different instances and stories. one of these people is Senior Education Support Officer Martina Redpath of the Armagh Planetarium in Northern Ireland. And she noted that the whole thing is just a jumble of a bunch of different incidences, like spy satellites, fringe ideas, and unusual science observations. And all these things have kind of been Frankensteined together. Now, one of the very first instances that started the buildup of this theory is the transmissions that were heard during Nikola Tesla's radio experiments in 1899, as well as long-delayed echoes heard by Jürgen Hals, a radio operator in Norway. And then there's a good couple of other notable ones. In 1954, there's a UFO researcher, Donald Kehoe, who told newspapers that the U.S. Air Force had reported 2 satellites orbiting Earth. And at the time, there wasn't any countries that had the technology to launch a satellite. Although it is noted here that Kehoe had been promoting a UFO book at the time, and news stories were likely written very tongue-in-cheek and not to be taken seriously. Though there was a British rocket also called the Black Knight rocket, and it was used in conjunction with the Blue Streak missile program between 1958 and 1965, and they were testing re-entry vehicles. So this is pre-spaceflight capabilities. And a Black Knight satellite launcher project was announced in 1964 and was considered a priority by the Ministry of Aviation. Now, the program never put anything into orbit, allegedly, but, who knows? It's one of those things where the government is not beholden to the people. They don't really have to tell us exactly what they're doing or what they achieve. Now, in February 1960, Time reported that the U.S. Navy had detected a dark object thought to be a Soviet spy satellite in orbit. A follow-up article confirmed that the object was the remains of an Air Force Discoverer 8 satellite that had gone astray. Interesting. Now, in 1963, astronaut Gordon Cooper supposedly reported a UFO sighting during his 15th orbit in Mercury 9 that was confirmed by tracking stations. But there's no evidence that this happened. In 1973, Scottish author Duncan Lunan analyzed the long-delayed radio echoes received by Hals in the early 1900s and speculated that they could possibly originate from a 13,000-year-old alien probe located in orbit around the Earth's moon. And he suggested that the probe may have originated from a planet located in the solar system of the star Epsilon Bootis, Bootis, although there are some funny little accent indicators over that second O there, so I'm not quite sure how you say that. Now, Lunan later retracted his conclusions, saying that he made, quote, outright errors, and that his methods had been unscientific. I'm betting somebody got to Lunan and told him, hey, no sir, don't you do that. Now, space debris photographed in 1998 during the STS-88 mission has been wildly claimed to be the Black Knight satellite, and that it actually burned up on entry into lower Earth atmosphere. And that was supposed by NASA astronauts. So it's pretty safe to say that this is one of the more modern conspiracies that I think is a part of the bedrock for the more classic alien imagery and iconography. Flying saucers, little green men, aliens sending signals to us to try to communicate. Now, if anything, stuff like this is really fun to dig through and think about. But also it's one of those things that should be a real driving force behind us on improving spacefaring technologies. If anything, human beings love to tell each other that they're wrong. So why don't we let our vanity and our ambition and our greed and our pride, all of the terrible things about people, why don't we let all of our bad juju really get the better of us here and let us come together and really improve on space travel, so we could go out and solve or debunk all of these myths and mysteries for what they really are, all in the greater name of exploration and discovery, of course. I mean, that kind of thing is super exciting and beyond important to humanity in general, really discovering what's out there. Though I highly doubt that we will make any kind of significant headway. I mean, not really. Not the kind that we would need to regularly travel out into space on just a whim. Like, oh, hey, the International Space Station needs bananas. Oh, okay, Jim, why don't you run up there and take him some bananas? I think we're still maybe 100 years or 200 years away from that. Unless we have a few more Elon Musks pop up that are starting their own companies, building rockets and spaceships and innovating that kind of technology. I think we're pretty far away from being so able to travel regularly both to and from Earth's lower atmosphere out into space. And we really should be stepping up efforts to do that. I mean, we gotta become a spacefaring civilization. We just have to. If we smaller scaled it and said, okay, all of humanity is living on Australia, right? The island continent of Australia. Well, there's a little over 8 billion humans, all packed into this one continent. It would be no wonder that we would be killing each other over resources and dividing each other into factions and trying to throw people off of the continent, and it just really regressing into the worst part of humanity, all to survive on this one small bit of land. The Earth is going to become that eventually, and I think we are smart enough now to recognize that it will, but I don't think that we have the wherewithal to determine exactly when that might happen. Regardless of that, I think we need to be getting out into space before we can even conceive of when that kind of scenario would happen. Even if we don't send out human colonies to other places, even colonizing space, like just building an enormous space station for people to go out and live in the middle of the solar system, let's say. We should be mining asteroids and stagnant comets for their water and minerals, doing all sorts of experiments and whatnot, discovering new elements, really seeing what's out there. And I do honestly believe that conspiracies like the Black Knight satellite conspiracy theory may just be the kind of driving force that we need. Maybe we do need some assholes that are going to say, hey, look, you all are terribly wrong about this. I've got $20 billion burning a hole in my pocket. I'm going to lead the next couple of steps in scientific innovation for aerospace and extraterrestrial travel. And I'm going to prove you all wrong and send some teams up there. And they'll be able to live up there and figure out what all of these different things are. They'll be able to capture and analyze and categorize these floating quote-unquote satellite objects. And you know what? Humanity will be all the better for it. But that is all the time I have for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning back in, and stick around for more Sci-Fi Unchained. But for now, live long and prosper, my friends, and may the Force be with us all.